You are sitting in your living room. The house is quiet. You look over at your canine companion resting on the rug. You decide to test them. You say a very specific word. Maybe it's walk. Maybe it's car. Or perhaps you just make a sudden, weird, high-pitched noise. Instantly, it happens. The reaction is automatic. You get that adorable 45-degree head tilt. One ear flops down, the other perks up. Their large, unblinking eyes lock onto yours. It is a moment of profound cross-species connection. It is the ultimate cute trigger. It inevitably elicits a smile, a laugh, and an overwhelming urge to reach into the jar and hand over a premium treat. We love this behavior. We wait for it. We actively try to provoke it. But when you ask the average pet owner why their dog just did that, you get the exact same answer every single time. Most people assume the dog is simply confused. We project our own human body language onto them. When a human is bewildered, we might furrow our brows or tilt our heads slightly. When we speak to a dog and they strike that iconic pose, our immediate psychological projection is, they don't understand what I'm saying. We think their brain is buffering. We think they are lost in translation. But behavioral neuroscience tells a completely different story. The second major assumption is rooted in basic operant conditioning, the manipulation myth. Behaviorists will point out that dogs are opportunistic learners. If a behavior pays off, they repeat it. Because we universally respond to the head tilt with a high-pitched "aw" and a physical reward, people assume the dog has simply learned a manipulative trick. They think the dog is faking it to extract affection and snacks from their gullible human. But this completely fails to explain the origin of the behavior. Puppies who have never been rewarded for the behavior will instinctively tilt their heads at novel sounds. If it's just a trick, why this specific, complex motor pattern instead of pawing or barking? The reality of the canine head tilt is vastly more complex. It is rooted in millions of years of evolutionary biology, auditory localization, visual clearing, and highly advanced cognitive processing. When your dog tilts their head, they are not confused. They are not playing you. You have absolutely no idea what is actually happening in their brain. To understand the tilt, we must first look at sensory ecology. How an animal utilizes its physical senses to interact with its environment. For dogs, hearing is a primary conduit of raw environmental data. It is second only to their sense of smell. A dog's ear is an evolutionary marvel. While humans have mere vestiges of ear muscles, dogs possess over 18 distinct muscles in their ears alone. These muscles allow the pinny, the external ear flaps, to rotate, tilt, raise, and lower. They operate like sophisticated, mobile radar dishes, and they capture sound waves with terrifying precision. Canine hearing operates at vastly different frequencies than ours. Humans max out at about 20,000 hertz. Dogs can hear frequencies as high as 65,000 hertz. They are detecting the ultrasonic frequencies of small prey, or the electronic hum of your refrigerator that are completely invisible to human ears. But hearing a sound is only half the battle. They have to locate it. When you speak, your dog's brain acts as an organic supercomputer. It calculates the exact location of your voice using two acoustic cues. First, interaural time difference. This is the fraction of a millisecond it takes for a sound wave to reach the ear closest to the source before hitting the further ear. Second, interaural level difference. The slight drop in volume as the sound passes through the acoustic shadow of the dog's own skull.
If a sound comes from the left, it hits the left ear microseconds faster and slightly louder. The brain maps it instantly.
These calculations are flawless on a horizontal plane, but there is a biological design flaw. Mammalian ears are positioned symmetrically on the sides of the head. This symmetry creates a phenomenon known in physics as the cone of confusion. If a sound originates from directly in front of the dog or directly behind them, the sound waves hit both ears at the exact same time, at the exact same volume. When you stand right in front of your dog and speak, their brain is suddenly starved of differential data. To a canine brain built for precision, this lack of data is unacceptable. So they fix it mechanically. By tilting their head 45 degrees, the dog artificially alters the spatial orientation of their ears. Suddenly, one ear is physically higher and slightly more forward than the other. This instantaneously changes both the timing and the volume of the sound wave hitting each ear. They are not confused. They are literally calibrating their organic radar to triangulate the exact distance and elevation of your voice. But auditory localization is just piece one of the puzzle. Dogs do not experience the world through isolated senses. They use cross-modal processing. They integrate hearing, sight, and smell simultaneously. This brings us to a groundbreaking theory popularized by Dr. Stanley Coren, a highly respected canine psychologist. To understand the visual aspect of the head tilt, you have to look at the world from the dog's physical perspective. Humans have flat faces. Our eyes are positioned forward, giving us an unobstructed view of the lower half of whatever we look at. Dogs have a prominent rostrum, a muzzle. To understand how this affects their vision, Dr. Coren suggests a simple experiment. Make a fist. Place it directly against your nose. Now look straight ahead. You will immediately notice that your fist creates a massive blind spot in the lower center of your visual field. If you look at someone's eyes right now, your fist completely obscures their mouth. When a dog looks directly at you, their own muzzle blocks their view of the lower half of your face. Why does this matter? Because dogs are highly visual communicators. When we speak, our mouths form different shapes. Our lips tighten or relax. We reveal our teeth in smiles or grimaces. By looking straight at you, the dog is missing 50% of your visual communication data. They can hear your tone, but they cannot see your expression. So, they deploy the head tilt. When a dog tilts its head, the muzzle rotates off its vertical axis. By shifting their head to the side, the dog is literally clearing their visual field. It acts exactly like a windshield wiper clearing rain from a glass pane. The obstruction drops out of the way. Suddenly, they can see your entire face, eyes, nose, and mouth, all at once. Dr. Coren didn't just hypothesize this, he proved it with data. Coren theorized that if the tilt was primarily a visual clearing mechanism, then dogs with longer muzzles should tilt their heads far more frequently than flat-faced breeds. Through a massive survey of 582 dog owners, the data was clear. Approximately 71% of owners with long-muzzled dogs, like greyhounds and retrievers, reported frequent head tilting. In contrast, only 52% of owners with brachycephalic dogs, like pugs and bulldogs, reported the behavior. Flat-faced dogs have a smaller blind spot. Therefore, they have less physiological need to tilt. This physical adjustment proves an intense psychological desire to understand you. Because here is a terrifyingly beautiful fact. No other animal on the planet can read human body language as adeptly as the domestic dog. Not even our closest primate relatives, the chimpanzees. Over 30,000 years of coevolution, dogs have developed highly specialized neurological pathways dedicated specifically to monitoring and interpreting human behavior.
Dogs do not understand English or Spanish in the syntactical sense. They understand human communication as a complex matrix of sounds, tones, and visual cues. When you say the word walk, they aren't just listening to the phonetic sound. They are looking at the dilation of your pupils, the tension in your jaw, the slight upward curl of your lips, the angle of your eyebrows. They are looking for micro-expressions, involuntary facial movements that occur in a fraction of a second. Research in pet psychology shows that dogs are uniquely attuned to human facial asymmetry. When humans look at a new face, our eyes naturally dart to the left side of the person's face first. Why? Because the right hemisphere of the human brain controls the left side of the face, and it is more dominant in expressing true emotion. Astonishingly, studies show that dogs do this exact same left gaze bias, but they only do it when looking at human faces. Not other dogs, not cats, only humans. By tilting their head to clear their visual blind spot, dogs ensure they do not miss these fleeting micro-expressions. They are actively analyzing your emotional state. This ties directly into emotional contagion. Dogs experience a measurable spike in their own stress hormone, cortisol, when they view an angry human. They experience a spike in oxytocin when viewing a happy human. The head tilt is the mechanical action required to facilitate this deep emotional resonance. To delve even deeper into the psychology of the tilt, we must look inside the canine skull. Just like humans, dogs have a laterally divided brain, a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. Each side processes information completely differently. This is known as lateralization. And how this affects their hearing is nothing short of mind-blowing. A landmark study published in the journal Current Biology by researchers Victoria Ratcliffe and David Reby shed incredible light on this. They played recordings of human voices to dogs from speakers placed on either side of them. They manipulated the recordings. Some emphasized the phonetic, linguistic content, the actual words. Others stripped the words away and solely emphasized the intonation and emotional tone of the voice. The findings were revolutionary. When dogs heard familiar phonetic commands, meaningful words they knew, they tended to turn their heads to the right. The right ear feeds primarily to the left hemisphere of the canine brain. This proved that the left hemisphere is responsible for processing meaningful, familiar phonetic sounds. It is the logic center. Conversely, when the dogs heard speech where the words were scrambled but the emotional tone was highly exaggerated, they turned their heads to the left. The left ear feeds primarily to the right hemisphere of the brain. This indicated that the right hemisphere specializes in processing raw, emotional, and acoustic cues. It is the feeling center. So how does this relate to the vertical head tilt? When you speak to your dog, you emit a highly complex auditory signal. It contains both phonetic meaning, the word treat, and emotional prosody, a high-pitched tone. From a neurological standpoint, the head tilt is an involuntary orienting response designed to feed specific types of auditory data to the correct brain hemisphere. If they are trying to parse the emotion, they tilt one way. If they are trying to decode the word, they tilt the other. You are literally watching a complex neurological sorting algorithm operating in real time. If you still think the head tilt is a sign of confusion, a 2021 study out of Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary is about to shatter that belief forever. Published in the journal Animal Cognition, researchers studied gifted word learner dogs. While the average dog knows a handful of commands, GWL dogs possess the extraordinary capacity to learn the names of dozens, sometimes over 100 specific toys.
The researchers observed 40 typical dogs and 7 gifted word learner dogs, mostly border collies. The owners stood in one room and asked the dogs to fetch a specific toy by name from another room. During this observation, a distinct, undeniable behavioral pattern emerged. When the owners spoke the name of the toy, the GWL dogs tilted their heads significantly more often than the typical dogs.
The data was staggering. The gifted dogs tilted their heads 43% of the time upon hearing the command. The typical dogs? Only 2% of the time. The researchers concluded that the head tilt is strongly, inextricably linked to increased attention, severe concentration, and memory retrieval. The GWL dogs weren't just hearing a noise. They were doing heavy cognitive lifting. When the owner said, "Bring me the blue rope," the dog's brain had to execute 4 functions instantly. 1. Phonetic recognition, recognizing the sound itself. 2. Semantic mapping, connecting that sound to a concept. 3. Visual memory retrieval, conjuring a mental image of what the blue rope actually looks like. 4. Spatial memory, remembering where that specific toy is located in the house. The head tilt is the physical byproduct of this intense mental cross-referencing. It is the canine equivalent of a human closing their eyes or looking up at the ceiling when trying to remember a difficult piece of trivia. The fact that only the dogs who actually knew the names of the toys tilted their heads destroys the confusion myth entirely. The dogs who were confused, the typical dogs who didn't know the words, did not tilt their heads. The head tilt is the absolute hallmark of a dog who is thinking deeply. To fully appreciate this behavior, we have to look backward in time. Evolution shapes behavior just as ruthlessly as it shapes anatomy. Why did the domestic dog develop this trait? If you go into the wilderness right now and speak to a gray wolf, the domestic dog's closest evolutionary ancestor, you will never get an adorable 45-degree head tilt. A wolf will hold its head rigid and evaluate you purely as a threat. The head tilt is a direct byproduct of the domestication process. Through a phenomenon known as domestication syndrome, selecting animals for tameness fundamentally alters their biology. One of the primary mechanisms of this is neoteny. Neoteny is the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. Domestic dogs are, in many biological ways, perpetual wolf puppies. They bark, they have floppier ears, and they exhibit vulnerable, highly neotenic behaviors, like the head tilt. From an evolutionary standpoint, dogs are essentially brilliant parasites that have convinced humans to happily pay for their housing and food. How? By hacking our psychological hardware. Ethologist Konrad Lorenz proposed the concept of the baby schema. Humans are biologically hardwired to respond to infantile features: large eyes, clumsy movements, vulnerability. When we see this, our brains flood with dopamine and oxytocin. We are compelled to nurture. When a dog tilts its head, it weaponizes this baby schema. The tilt exposes the neck, a universal sign of vulnerability. It enlarges the appearance of the eyes. It mimics a childlike inquisitiveness. Early in the domestication process, proto-dogs that naturally exhibited these behaviors were perceived as endearing by early humans. They were allowed closer to the fire. They got more scraps of meat. The head tilt survived in their genetics because it acted as a psychological key, unlocking human empathy. This leads to the most emotional revelation of all. Pet psychology is the study of the dyad, the dynamic relationship between human and pet. A 2015 study led by Takefumi Kikusui at Azabu University proved that when dogs and humans gaze into each other's eyes,
Both species experience a massive spike in oxytocin, the love hormone. This is the exact same neurochemical feedback loop that exists between human mothers and their infants. Dogs are the only animals on Earth that can hijack this pathway.
The head tilt facilitates this gaze. By tilting their head and locking their wide eyes onto yours, the dog initiates the oxytocin loop. When you respond with a soft voice, a smile, and a physical caress, you complete the circuit. The dog's brain registers your positive reaction, validating their intense cognitive effort. They successfully gathered the data, read your micro-expressions, and achieved a state of chemical, social harmony. Think about what happens the next time you hold up a leash and say, "Walk." You trigger a multi-sensory symphony. Your voice emits sound waves. The dog alters its interoral time differences by tilting, feeding the tone to its right brain and the word to its left brain. Simultaneously, the neck muscles rotate the obstructing muzzle downwards. The visual field clears. The visual cortex scans the microscopic tightening of your facial muscles to confirm you are happy and safe. Then, the word reaches the auditory processing centers. The memory banks fire up. The dog pictures the front door and the feeling of the harness. Your brain's caregiving centers light up in response, flooding your system with oxytocin. All of this complex physics, neurology, and chemistry happens in less than 1 single second. It is a flawless, biologically perfected feedback loop between two entirely different species. But a responsible dive into behavioral neuroscience requires a vital warning. Context is everything. If the head tilt occurs only when you are communicating or making noises, it is the brilliant cognitive behavior we just explored. However, if your dog presents a persistent head tilt, meaning their head remains tilted even when resting, walking in a quiet room, or unengaged, this is no longer a behavioral quirk. It is a massive red flag. A persistent chronic head tilt is the primary indicator of vestibular disease. This is a severe affliction of the inner ear or brainstem that controls balance and spatial orientation. It can indicate deep ear infections, physical trauma, or neurological conditions like strokes or tumors. In these cases, the dog's sense of equilibrium is utterly destroyed. They are tilting their head because the world is spinning. If the behavior suddenly becomes a permanent posture, you need to go to a vet immediately. Assuming your dog is healthy, it is time to change how we view them. The next time your dog tilts their head, resist the urge to just laugh and assume they are hopelessly confused. Respect the immense biological machinery at work. Acknowledge that they are actively manipulating the physical orientation of their sensory organs to triangulate your voice. Appreciate that their laterally divided brain is firing on all cylinders, and recognize that thousands of years of evolution have culminated in this exact moment. The head tilt is not confusion. It is the ultimate expression of empathy, focus, and cross-species love. It is the physical manifestation of a dog saying, "You are the center of my universe right now, and I am using every ounce of my brain power to understand you." Has your dog mastered the head tilt? What specific word triggers it for them? Let me know in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe, because in the next video, we are breaking down why your dog dramatically sighs when they lie down. And the neuroscience behind that is even stranger than you'd expect.